Hi, this is Max Hawthorne, and today we're going to be taking a look at the cryptids known as phantom cats, aka ABCs, alien big cats, or as they're called in the UK, British big cats. Said cats have been present in folklore since medieval times, if not before, and are often described as a black panther. There are, of course, variants, with some descriptions more exotic than others. Size estimates vary. Claims of attacks on and the slaughtering of livestock are common, and there have even been reports of human beings being set upon and injured. Identification, i.e. feral dogs, a known predator such as the lynx or cougar being outside its regular range, or escaped exotic pets such as leopards, caracals, etc. Back in December of 2016, I found a series of tracks from a very large cat imprinted in 1 inch of snow that had fallen the night before. They were a solid 4 inches across, suggesting a large adult mountain lion. That following spring, the smell of a dead body began wafting from the trees behind our house. The police were called, and a partly consumed and rotting deer carcass was found maybe 50 yards into the woods. Was it the same cat, or was it a cat at all? Who can say? In addition to the cat tracks, there have been several incidents where something struck the side of my house. A particularly startling incident took place while I was in my office, and the impact sounded and felt like a battering ram slamming into the wall. I don't remember the exact date. I wrote it off as a large deer, possibly startled by something and springing into the wall by mistake. There was a similar, albeit less extreme, occurrence that took place the following November. I posted about it on my Facebook page. With things like that going on, I'd taken to having the security cameras feed live on my monitor. I've used the capture clip function many times and have gotten footage of foxes, raccoons, opossums, and an assortment of feral cats. There was one morning that I had woken up to discover a recording of what appeared to be an exceptionally large and robust black house cat. It had walked out onto the ledge near my office window and stared intently inside. It was the biggest black cat I've ever seen, even larger than our big Siberian forest cat Olaf. Like an idiot, I forgot about this clip until after the 30-day save period had ended. Despite repeated calls to our alarm company, the footage was lost. On 8/5/21, I heard some rustling sounds going on in the flower bed outside my office windows. I hit the capture button only to see what appeared to be just another feral cat walking by. I saved the clip and forgot about it until a year or two later. At that point, and based on its body shape, I suspected it might have been a young puma. I even did a blog post on it. It wasn't until I got some cropped and zoomed in versions of the footage and adjusted both lighting and contrast that I realized I appeared to have stumbled upon something far more exotic. Let's take a look at the footage. The first thing that drew my eye was that, as crazy as it sounds, as it travels, the cat seems to change shape. It appears to stretch, morph, and even increase in mass. It's very bizarre, but since we're dealing with an 11-second clip filmed with a run-of-the-mill IR security company camera with a frame rate of just 10 FPS, we have to be careful rushing to judgment. Luckily, my college degree was in film and animation, so I have some experience. Traditional cell animation is often done at 12 FPS. It's acceptable for most uses like television commercials and tends to be fairly smooth, except in instances of rapid movement. A frame rate of 10 FPS will not be as smooth, so one can expect some jerkiness, especially at times where a subject moves quickly or suddenly changes direction. Luckily for us, the animal's movements are all slow and in a relatively straight line, so there's little of that. As we're dealing with zoomed-in IR footage, I've ramped up the contrast to make things pop more. I'm going to go through it frame by frame in an effort to reveal hidden details. As we do so, I will focus on key frames or groups of frames that are particularly revealing. Before we begin, however, I want to point out something that will hopefully give the inevitable doubting Thomases pause. This right side frame represents one of the first broadside views of our mystery cat. On the left is one of the last frames. Here we see the same supposed cat, except it's now facing the windows. The footage is understandably grainy, but even so, when compared, you can see the creature on the left is far more massive than the one on the right. It is a tiny bit closer in that it has turned toward the camera and its head is now overlapping the concrete slab. Still, that distance, even combined with forced perspective, doesn't justify such an increase in size. Its head alone, which by the way no longer appears cat-like, must be 4 or 5 times the mass, and despite being hunched down, its body seems far more robust. Now that we've set the stage, let's start working our way through the footage. First, let's tab our way along, frame by frame, until something happens. We see the first evidence of our furry friend on frames 13 through 16. It's got these huge luminescent eyes, evidence of the typical tapetum lucidum or retroreflector tissue found in cats and other animals. It's from frames 17 to 22 where things start to get interesting. As we tab back and forth, I want you to watch this area right here. The cat's head is here, yet there appears to be a second face emerging from the region that should be its left neck or shoulder. What is it? It almost looks like the face of a shark coming at you, or something else. Strangely, from frames 17 to 19, it doesn't seem to move, as if the cat was passing behind it. But then, from 20 to 22, it moves with the animal. Let's look at frames 20 to 22, where they've been further adjusted in terms of contrast and brightness. As you see, it actually looks like there is a second head or mouth growing out of the cat's neck. It appears to have nasty looking teeth and possibly eyes. Moreover, in frame 22, it seems as if said second appendage may have duplicated itself, as if there were a pair of faces now gazing toward the camera where before there was one. I took a moment to indicate what may be eyes here and here. So, what are we looking at? Is this cat suddenly growing additional appendages and non-feline heads at that? Your guess is as good as mine. Let's keep going. Frames 23 to 35 are even more interesting. Let's move forward and backward through them first to see what jumps out. The first thing I notice is our shark face tends to remain and, interestingly, it seems to hold position. It begins to fade after frame 31, but there are still indications of it. There are also indications of what may be a second, larger face starting at around frame 26 and continuing until frame 33. There are indications of big, menacing eyes and an open mouth with possible suggestions of teeth. It appears almost goblin-like. You can see it even better in these enhanced frames. The eyes appear large and are potentially lidless, the mouth gaping and appears lined with teeth. As we move back and forth, we see the same behavior exhibited as our initial shark head. The face remains in position while the cat's overall mass moves forward. We see other odd things going on. For example, as we toggle back and forth, we see indications of eye shine, but in multiple places at the same time. Could this be residual imagery? We also see something odd going on with the cat's overall structure. In frame 27, we see that weird eye shine moving forward, with the back looking relatively smooth. In 28, we see the head continuing forward, but something pointy appears here. And in 29, a second pointy object, which presumably is the cat's ears. Why they're here, however, when the cat's head appears to already be here, however, is a mystery. Is this again some sort of residual imagery? Are we somehow now seeing multiple animals? On the unenhanced footage, it doesn't appear so, but when viewed frame by frame, it tells a different tale.
As we transition from frame 33 to 34, we see something else unusual. The first is our goblin appears to remain stationary. Then, as the cat's hindquarters move past it, it starts to fade out. We also see our cat's main headlights appear once more, full and bright. By frame 38, our goblin appears to be gone, but there are suggestions of another possible face moving alongside the cat, or perhaps protruding from it. You can see them indicated on the darkened versions of frames 35 and 38. Interestingly, that odd eye shine seems to correspond to these possible faces here and then here. Even more interesting are the eyes shown here, especially the left one, which appears to be globular in shape, and as we move back and forth from frames 34 to 36, we see what seems to be the cat's body moving behind the eyes. It's as if they are crystal hemispheres that we can see through. And again, the cat's main eyes are here.
From 38 to 42, we have some more oddness. What I'm tempted to call traveling faces seem to hold stationary instead of moving along with the cat, and then vanish as it moves past them. One appears to have large eyes and a heavy jaw. The other is rather simian-like. Are they tricks of the light? Are they protruding from the cat? Could they be other beings that perhaps run interference for the cat, but vanish when it's no longer behind them? You can see more of this with the darkened versions. And what is this object right here? It almost looks like a crocodile's open mouth looking at you, but are those eyes atop it? Notice it remains stationary again as the cat moves. Starting at 42 and moving through 47, the adventure continues. First, our ape face disappears, and our forward-facing crocodile appears to morph into something else. The mouth becomes more amorphous. You can actually see teeth disappear and reappear, and above the mouth we see what looks like a bunch of globules. Are those eyes? If so, there appear to be many. The darkened version makes it really pop. Again, is this part of the cat or something else? As if that wasn't enough, to the left of this strange visage, another possible face appears. At frame 42 there are only suggestions of it, but by 46 and 47 it appears fully there. There are indications of paired eyes and a large mouth facing the camera. It appears possibly reptilian, almost like a huge gecko or something. Again, it seems stationary, with the cat perhaps moving behind it. Could this be part of said cat, protruding outward like a shield? If it is a shifter, as I suspect it may well be, could it be trying to make up its mind as to what to turn into? Or could it have sensed a potential threat? Could this be a defensive posture to confuse or intimidate? That last thought looms large as we see something else, something seemingly impossible going on with our cat's supposedly legitimate original head at the same time. It appears to sprout multiple heads, a la Cerberus. We see it start in frames 42 and 43. One head becomes two, two becomes three, or perhaps even four. And for the skeptics, we're not talking about residual imagery, which would be multiple versions of the same image or images. These frames suggest new heads from different angles, and the eyes in said heads even appear to either narrow or at one point blink. By 47, the front end of our cat looks like a pack of hyenas, all peering through the camera or at me through my office window. An interesting and disturbing thought. Before we continue, I should point out that, according to one of my colleagues, it is possible, even likely, that the extraneous body parts we're seeing are indeed all parts of the same creature. It may be confused as to what form it wishes to assume, possibly trying to choose the most suitable one for what it's currently hunting. As a result of its indecision, the digital camera becomes confused. It is unable to keep up with all the partial changes and tries to break up what it's perceiving into multiple images, only to recombine everything as the cat continues to advance and said extraneous images move with it. It is an intriguing possibility. From frames 47 to 49, we see another unusual shift. In frame 47, we see this odd-looking face on what would presumably be the cat's hindquarters begin to move to the left. At this point, it appears more like exposed brain matter with eyes on it, and appears to move behind our still present gecko face. As it does, we see an indication of a possible pair of triangular-shaped forms visible through the gecko. What they are is impossible to say. They could be teeth, eyes, it's anyone's guess, but they're there through frames 48 and 49. From frames 49 to 56, we see some exciting changes taking place. The cat's face and forelimbs are turned toward the camera at this point, and with its head, or rather heads, remaining relatively stable, it begins to shift its hindquarters laterally until its entire body is pointed almost directly toward either the camera or the windows. A frame-by-frame analysis shows something intriguing. In frame 49, we see the gecko face holding position, while what appears to be the supposed cat's main head appears around here in frame 50. As we toggle through, we can see indications of vertical bars that suggest teeth on the main head. Notice also that not only does the rear portion of its body move, but the eyes of the Cerberus heads appear to remain in position as well. as if perhaps they're inside its body now. Lastly, as the darkened frames show best, we see one other intriguing change. In 49, we can see the gecko head's eyes here and here. In 50, however, we see that the right side eye, its left, moves laterally with the body. You can see it here as we flip back and forth. It's there for 51 as well, until it's apparently absorbed in 52. This is potentially evidence that my friend is correct. The camera has a tough time tracking this thing's movements to the body changing shape. Its computer is predicting movement that naturally should take place, and it becomes confused as new portions appear and start generating movement that shouldn't be there. In this case, however, we actually see the gecko head move laterally with the hindquarters before it is apparently absorbed into the creature's main mass. One last point about frame 56 before we surge ahead. In this particular frame, we see a sudden indication of what may be a triangular mouth. These appear to be eyes and these lips, scale-covered ones. It may, however, be something else. We see it in 54, then 55, and 56. The so-called labily scaled lips may in fact be more like tentacles, like the underside of an octopus, but segmented instead of lined with suckers. Before we get to see more of whatever is going on here, however, something happens. The camera experiences a glitch of some kind. Everything becomes so pixelated you can't see anything. I have no explanation for this. Perhaps the camera couldn't keep track anymore and tried to reboot. Perhaps the creature exuded some sort of energy that interfered with it. I've been told that the latter tends to happen, but of course it's impossible to say. The only thing I can say for sure is that in over 300 clips, this type of malfunction has never before happened. Whatever the case, the interference stays like that for several seconds from frames 57 to 70. We do get indications of the creature moving laterally and some suggestion that it is still a quadruped. In frame 61, for example, as can be seen in this darker version, we see suggestions of a potential cat-like shape, legs bent in a wide crouch and with it facing the camera. Starting at frame 70 and up to frame 75, the creature becomes visible again. At this point, we have indications of a more stable form. There are suggestions of what may be a head, eyes, and an upper, lower jaw and mouth, which, for a split second at least, appears steady while again the body seems to move around behind it. From 75 to 80, things get kinda nasty. You can see a start here, a shift from frame 75 to 76. The head seems to either dissolve away or be absorbed, and in its place is this mass that, again, is reminiscent of the underside of an octopus, segmented tentacles splaying out from a central hub, or perhaps the tendrils of a hydra, or even an appendage. It's disturbing to see, but nonetheless, it's there. Starting from frame 81 up to frame 93, the weirdness continues. From 80 to 81, we see the tentacle-like mass begin to recede, and a seeming pair of heads appears to take its place. A larger, gargoyle-like face with tusks is on the left, and a smaller, rather fish-like head with a gaping, arch-shaped mouth is on the right, where the cat's right forelimb should be. From 93 to 94, our final shift kicks in. Watch as I toggle back and forth. You can see a glowing eye appear here on both the increased contrast and darker versions. Then, as we proceed frame by frame, we see the gargoyle-like face on the left begins to shift a bit, and the fish-like one on the right begins to fade into the body, possibly being reabsorbed. It may be the creature finally decided on what form it would take. The left head remains quite large, but begins to appear more like that of a huge hyena versus the gargoyle it was previously. It does, however, appear to have 4 eyes at this point instead of 2. Meanwhile, the right head or face appears to be changing into an actual forelimb. At least the open maw seems to be fading away, although it's tough to say for sure before the clip runs out. This is the final image we end up with, filmed from a distance of around 15 feet. Now that we've reached the end, I suppose one question we should ask is, how big is this creature? Back when I thought it might have been a young puma, I went out and did some measuring. The point indicated on the tape measure represents 18 inches. This includes a 7-inch drop as shown and is evidenced by my missing feet and ankles. The wall height beneath the railing shown is also indicated and measured 6.75 inches. By inserting one of the final frames of our creature beside me, we can now get a rough size estimate by comparing it to a 6 foot 1 inch human male weighing around 240 pounds. If we draw a line straight across at the previously indicated 18-inch mark, we see that the hump of the creature's shoulders is a few inches higher than that, probably 2 to 3 inches or so. It's also hunched down, as if it were preparing to spring, or perhaps was in an aggressive or defensive pose, sort of like this. If it were fully upright, it would probably stand around 28 inches at the shoulder. That is, in its current form, of course. But what is it? Its body appears to have gone through myriad changes, and in the end, no longer looks feline. A simple comparison between the original panther-like shape and the final shows obvious differences. The body is now much more massive and hunched, the head 4 or more times the size, and it may possibly possess extra eyes. If I had to guess, I would say that this particular phantom cat is what is known as a shifter, a being that is able to change forms. If it is, then this footage is rarer than rare. As to how it does the things it does, I have no idea. I should mention that I've spoken to people who claim to know about these particular cryptids, and have been told that, in addition to large felines, they tend to assume the form of other animals, like foxes, dogs, or hyenas. I've also heard claims that they can appear as a lion or a human giant. I don't know about the latter, but the creature's head in these final frames does appear a bit leonine, so I guess it's possible. Mass in its current form is tough to say, but I spoke to someone in the know, and they estimated its weight at around 170 pounds. No giant by any stretch, but I certainly wouldn't want to grab it and try and put a leash on it. So there you have it, folks. Your phantom cat, aka ABC or alien big cat, appears to be a shapeshifter. At least this one does. Does this mean that all big black cats spotted across the world are shifters? Unlikely. The odds of there being escaped exotic pets trying to eke out an existence in unfamiliar settings are high. That said, however, if a creature like this apparent shifter was to choose a form to stalk prey, that of a big cat with its keen senses, teeth, talons, and inherent stealth capabilities would be ideal. Thanks, everyone. This is Max Hawthorne, and I hope you've enjoyed this documentary. Feel free to submit comments below. Also, don't forget to go to my author site at cronusrising.com and check out the nifty downloads on the free books section. Today's focus book is Cronus Rising, my debut novel and 2014's Book of the Year winner. It continues to appear on Amazon bestseller lists and was touted by Publishers Weekly as being worthy of sitting on the shelf next to Peter Benchley's Jaws. If you haven't picked up a copy yet, by all means, please do so. You guys and gals are the reason I do the things I do, and your support and feedback are always appreciated.